Hello, I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week. Garden trees. Now, let's talk about them. I'm not going to talk about the standard, which are the grafted ones. I have done that and given you a lot of great information and enough information to select the right kind of standard for your garden. In other words, a mini tree. These are little trees that are for smaller gardens, but they're a little bigger. And they haven't been dwarfed, they just are. So let's start with some of the Japanese maples. Butterfly. Now, the butterfly Japanese maple is probably one of my favorites. It's going to be tender. We grow it here in Niagara quite often. You'll see it in a lot of gardens, simply because the foliage is green and white. It is a small, finely cut leaf and smaller tree. It's very nice as a small tree, and it's usually done as a multi-stem, though it doesn't have to be. This one is best as an understory tree as well. In other words, slight shade. Then there's Katsura Japanese maple. It's one of the first trees to emerge in the spring, so location on this one that it's a little protected from late frost is a good idea. The emerging foliage is sort of an orange gold. It's very compact, so you're going to be looking at a smaller tree, 10 to 12 feet, but still compact. The leaves are long, elegant, and lobed and lime green in the summertime, and the fall color is a vivid copper tone. So you've got good color range at different seasons. They're great in the landscape, and of course it's also can be used in large containers with proper winter care. Now, it is going to be 10 to 12 feet, so select your area correctly, particularly with the fact that it does emerge very early in the spring and is a little susceptible to late spring frost. Then there's Siryu. This is another Japanese maple. It's extremely finely dissected leaves. It's very upright tree form. It's because it's so finely dissected, it gives that very different look to a garden. It's got green foliage that turns bright red in the fall. It's one of the easiest of the Japanese maples to grow. And yet it still gives you that sort of good, fine texture into a garden. It's going to be 10 to 15 feet tall. And definitely a good one, but you're going to have to put it in the right location. Think of these as small trees for a small garden. There is also, in the birches, a golden treasure, and I think this is well named. We're looking at a dwarf birch tree. It's only going to be 2 to 4 feet tall. Its new growth is an orange-red, and it's sort of shrubby, of course. It's a birch, but all year round with tiny yellow leaves in the summertime. So it's got a change of color. It can be sheared, shaped, hedged, or trained into a miniature patio tree. Very neat. Think of this as a bonsai. It is exceptionally winter hardy. We're looking at zone 2. That is something that, we just don't hear about. So it's extremely, extremely winter hardy. It came out of the Czech Republic, so yeah, we can understand that. Golden Treasure Birch is another great one that you really want to take a look at as well. Now there is, of course, red buds. And red buds are, in my opinion, short-lived trees. You're looking at 15 years before they start to degrade. But they are, in most cases, a nice compact tree that breaks flower right from the wood before leaves, which makes it really an interesting tree. But also it gives you a bloom time and extends it so that you have something blooming in the garden earlier. They come in different colors. Most of the time, the leaves are dark green, heart-shaped. The one called Don Egolf is very disease-resistant. That means it'll probably live longer than the usual 10 to 20 years. And excellent plant if you're going to grow it as a understory tree. You're looking at 6 to 8 feet in height, which is nice. It's a smaller tree without getting out. So if you've got a nice sort of small garden, then this is something that you may want to try. There are a few others that I want to, but I'm going to go and skip over to a chamois cypress. Now, these are false cypress. They're evergreens. They have a tendency to be more of an evergreen spire, or how about fat little fella is the best way to do it, than they are the standard typical deciduous tree. The one I want to sort of point out is Sun Gold. It's a dwarf. It's a slow-growing globe or broad pyramid with bright golden thread-like foliage that does not fade in the summertime, and there's the key. Hardy to zone 4. It's only 2.5 to 3 feet. It's evergreen, so you may really like it. Now, there's also one that's more pyramidal, and it's called Soft Serve. Soft Serve is a compact conical of chamois cypress, soft fern-like branching and foliage. The bright green on the top and flecked with silver blue on the undersides. So a little bit different, particularly in a spot where you might get a little wind and a little turning over. You may see this difference in color. It'll probably be fairly subtle. It's a great substitute for dwarf Alberta spruce. It is a sport of the boulevard chamois cypress, so it is much smaller than, of course, boulevard. There is also a new one called Ray of Light that can get 8 to 10 feet. It's pyramidal. It's a false cypress, chamois cypress. It has white to gold to green foliage, and that radiates out. It's going to be interesting in the fact that it's hardy to zone 5, so you should be able to see it here quite readily and try that one. These are just something that are a little different, out of the norm, that you may find actually gives you. So there you go, sort of a few smaller, interesting trees that you can put into your garden to give you there's something a little unusual you can actually try and look for this spring plants in your garden. I'm Bruce Zimmerman. This is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week. That it is definitely worth your while to make the effort to get these. I will point out another one, which is a dogwood. It is a pagoda dogwood, which means it's a variegated leaf, and it's layered with the variegated leaves, which are gold and yellow. Now, the leaves are bright yellow, dotted with a regular green thumbprint, right in sort of in the middle there. The new growth often is flushed with hues of red and orange, and It's attractive, lacy white spring flowers, which are typical of this type of dogwood. But it likes filtered shade, so you're going to have to really pick this one. It's hardy to zone 3, but it's also going to be 10 to 12 feet. Be careful on this one, simply because it's going to be wide. That tiering effect gives you a width as well. So even though it's 10 to 12 feet tall, it will actually be almost the same width. So be aware of that, unless you trim it up as it grows. Another small tree for the garden is one that is mistakenly called smoke bush. Now, smoke bushes come into size and usually end up being about 8 to 10 feet and can be trimmed into a tree. And they are generally classified as a tall shrub or shrubby tree, depending on who you talk to. So what I would suggest is that you go out into the nursery, look for a single-stemmed one instead of a multi-stemmed one, and trim it up as much as you can and grow it as a tree, because I think you'll find you'll like it better. It is more important to grow it as a tree with a stem about 3 to 4 feet and then let it go. You know that it's going to be about 6 to 8 feet. So Royal Purple is the one that's been around for a long time. It's going to be normally an 8 to 10 foot smoke tree, and it gives you that sort of pinkish red blooms in early to midsummer. You know, those airy looking flower heads. Purple holds color, and that is why most people grow this one whenever. It really is a good one. In the fall, it gets even darker, so it moves towards purple-black, and it is excellent in the fact that you will find that the leaves will actually give you some color as well. Now, as a tree, it is probably pretty. You may have to understand that this tree breaks into leaf late. It also doesn't have normal buds. It's more like a bud shield. So until it starts to break out, you can't tell exactly what is good, what's bad, etc. So just leave it alone, let it break out, and train from there. There is another couple of varieties out there that you can try. Both are 8 to 10 feet. Golden Spirit, which is more of a golden yellow foliage that sort of changes into a coral orange or red in the fall. The leaves don't scorch in direct sunlight, which is important. 8 to 10 feet, and of course, those funny looking blooms that are very airy and open. Grace is another, again 8 to 10 feet, summer bloom. It's a deep pink flower panicle, which is that airy, open things, but it's a deep pink in early summer. The new leaves emerge in intense wine red and mature to a dusky reddish blue, in turning almost to a bright orange red in the fall. It's very large, can be trained into a small tree. In fact, I would recommend it. That way you can plant underneath it other plants. And understand that it'll break leaf later, which means the bulbs, if you plant bulbs around here, will be able to build up enough energy before the leaves all come out, particularly if you use early blooming bulbs. So try that, as well as mix in maybe some hostas, etc., and you may just find that you've got a cool, beautiful garden I'd throw a few small ferns in there too. Maybe some Japanese painted ferns. Hey, I like this idea. Anyways, try those things, put it together, and enjoy. So a small tree for a small garden. I'm Bruce Zimmerman. This is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week.